You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense books. I'm your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 126. In this episode of the podcast, we'll be meeting Les Edgerton, who has published more than 20 books in his career. His latest, Hard Times, was published by Bronzeville Books on December 7th, 2020. Lee also teaches creative writing on the university level through private coaching of writers and on various online venues. He currently lives with his wife, Mary, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And during this podcast, we chat about his background, which includes serving 2 years in prison for burglary, his service in the Navy, and his work teaching other writers, and then, of course, also about his writing process and his own books. So stay tuned for that interview coming up here in just a moment. A quick reminder, please rate and review this podcast. Go to thrillingreads.com/rate so you can leave your rate and review. Helps me get the word out about this podcast. And check out thrillerauthors.com to access my archive of over 120 interviews with amazing writers of thrillers, mysteries, and suspense. Okay, here's my interview with Les Edgerton. Les, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Alan. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I'm kind of nervous, so if I, stumble or anything, I'll break out the jack. I'll be all right.
Yeah, all right. That's all you need. So can you tell us about your background and, how your life has influenced your writing? Because it's been a very interesting path you've taken.
Well, thanks. I think that's on purpose. It wasn't an accident. I read my first book when I was about 5. Actually, I taught myself to read. And when I was 5, and I thought, I like this. And I thought, well, I could write a better book than this guy. And turned out I couldn't then, but I can now, I think. And I always thought the way you became a writer, a good writer, was you did the Jack London School of Writing. You just had experiences, then you wrote about them. So I did that. I'm 77. I did that until I was about 70. And just went out on purpose and got in bad situations for the experience. And then when I was about 70, I read this interview with Flannery O'Connor. And she said, if you live in the same little town, in the same little house for 17 years, you got all the material you'll ever need as a writer. And I thought, damn, I wish I'd have read that years ago. I could have saved myself a lot of grief. But I didn't. So there you go. But no, I grew up kind of rough in East Texas on the Gulf. My grandmother had a bar and a cab company, and we ate all our meals at the bar. And actually, when I was 12, I bartended for and all kinds of stuff when I was a lot younger, 8, 9, 10 years old. The laws were different then. We're talking then in the 50s. And saw a lot of guys get in fights, saw guys get killed and stuff like that. But when I was 12, she said, you're old enough now to learn the cab business. So she made me the night dispatcher at our cab company, which is in a little shack on a vacant lot next to the bar. And she picked a slow night. Freeport, Texas, where I grew up, has a lot of ships coming in to offload chemicals and oil and gas and all that stuff. And we always had Norwegian and Russian tankers in port. And she had a cab company which would bring the sailors down to her bar. So she had it going all, she was a pretty smart lady. So, but she put me in a midnight shift thinking it'd be slow for my first day as a 12-year-old. And it was slow. And one of the drivers are mostly drifters. That's who used to drive cabs, and nice guys, but they're kind of a rough group. And one was teasing another guy with a rattlesnake. Well, the rattlesnake was dead, but the guy he was teasing didn't know that. He thought it was alive. And he kept telling him, keep that thing away from me, man. I'm scared of snakes. And the guy thought it was funny. He finally ended up throwing it at the guy, wrapped around his neck. The other guy pulled out a pistol and shot him in the throat and killed him instantly, blood all over. Now, as a dispatcher, it's my job to call the cops. So we couldn't dial 911. Then you had to look up the number. So I looked it up and called them. And they eventually had a trial, and the guy got acquitted because times were different then. They said it was justifiable. But the guy did get out of town quick because the guy shot had a lot of friends and relatives. But that was when I was 12. And it got more exciting from then on.
Wow. So you've been accumulating stories since 12 years old. I can't even imagine.
Well, the book that I wrote for Danny, it just came out, Hard Times. I wrote that when I was 12.
Oh, really? Okay. I was going to ask you about that too.
Stories. Yes,
Yeah.
based on two short stories. One I used to call A Mother's Love, and the other one was The Mockingbird Cafe. And uh, I I remember laying on the couch writing the story in longhand at the time, and I didn't know how to get things published, and I just knew how to write. And so it wasn't until I was in my early 20s that I got it published finally.
Hmm.
And then it came out in my short story collection. Well, my agent now, Svetlana Piranko, I'm sorry, she's got offices in Dublin and Paris. And she read it and she said, Les, she said, that story has haunted me ever since I read it. She says, if there's any way you can make a novel out of this, she said, and do it right. She says, I think you can rival Cormac McCarthy for voice and everything. And so that's what I did. I tried to. I don't know if I achieved what she wanted, but I'm happy with it. But yeah, I was right. I had a lot of stuff written by the time I was 12, 13 years old. I just didn't know what you did to get it published. So it just sat in a drawer.
Yeah, and I should say that Danny Gardner, we talked a little bit offline. I interviewed him for the show, and he really credits you a lot with helping him out and everything. So that's awesome that now I'm talking to you, and it's being put out by the publishing house that he founded.
Yeah. Danny's a remarkable guy. He's a brilliant writer. He's just a brilliant guy. He's done comedy. He's done everything. He's one of my heroes.
Yeah, I saw that when I was. He had mentioned he was on Def Jam comedy tour, so I looked it up, and I saw his. He was so young when he was on there. I was like, wow, how do you even get there? Were you like 21 or something? I don't know.
Yeah, he was a punk.
Yeah. So the stories and so Hard Times, the stories there, and the characters. I mean, they're all based on things that you experienced when you were growing up.
Kind of. I've said it in the early the Depression era, and so I wasn't alive then, but I grew up in the same area in East Texas and New Orleans. We lived in Freeport, Texas, and went back and forth from there to Algiers, Louisiana, which is across the river from New Orleans. So that's my milieu, and the people haven't changed much. It's a culture that doesn't trust the law. We don't call the law when things go wrong. We take care of it ourselves, and it's a very moral and religious culture, and that hasn't changed. And I knew it hadn't changed from the Depression. It was still pretty much the same. So no, I didn't have to do much research, and I set it in a big thicket, which has always fascinated me. I grew up a little south of the Big Thicket, but the Big Thicket is an interesting part of Texas. It's I don't know if you remember Roy. God, I can't think of his name. He fought for the heavyweight championship. He fought Floyd Patterson, and he's from the Big Thicket. And he's from a town in the Big Thicket called Cut and Shoot, Texas. And it's called Cut and Shoot because that's all they had to do on a Saturday night was cut and shoot each other. And it's a rough area, but I grew up in a rough area too in Freeport, Texas. It's definitely a honky tonk area, and I grew up in a honky tonk. So yeah, whole different world and a whole different code of honor and everything. But they do have a very strict code of honor. You take care of stuff yourself. You don't call John Law. You just handle it yourself.
And do you find it was challenging, like writing, a book set in the 30s? I mean, like before we have everything we have now, all this technology stuff. Was it
no?
challenging?
And that's probably why I chose it, because even though we got cell phones and all that, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with that kind of world, the pre-electronic world, pre-Facebook and all that stuff world. I'm very comfortable with that. So no, it wasn't a stretch at all. And like I said, even though I didn't live through that period, I came a little later. I was born in 1943. I know that the people and the culture was still pretty much the same. So I really didn't have to do a lot of research.
And then that book comes out December 8th, and it's available right now for pre-order. So
yes, it is.
So people can go check that out.
And I just mentioned that it's close to Christmas, so I'd rush out and buy at least 2 copies.
Yeah, therefore, great gifts.
One for yourself and one for a gift, maybe 2 or 3 for gifts.
Yeah. So I also, when I was doing my research on you do a lot of what you teach creative writing courses at many universities and professional writing programs. So how did you get into teaching? And
Well,
yeah.
I made a mistake. I went and got my MFA, which I wish I'd saved my money and bought coffee instead. And I went to a really good school, but it's just, I already knew how to write. And it's more for, I think, people that are more sheltered in their lives, maybe haven't had the experiences and haven't read as much. But I'm a voracious reader. I read from 3 to 5 novels a week, and I have all my life. So I've read everything there is. I really have. And I knew how to write. That's how you learn to write, I think. But I started teaching for UCLA in a writers program, extension school. I got fired from that job eventually. I get fired from all my jobs. But my attitude is I was looking for a job when I found this one, so it's not a big deal. And I was writer in residence for 3 years at University of Toledo, got fired from that. And well, I didn't get fired, just didn't get renewed. Taught at Trine University and a bunch of things. But the students I was teaching asked me to coach them privately, and I did. And in about a 15-year period up till now, and I teach an online novel writing course now, I've had over 3 dozen people get their books published. So I think I've been very successful. I don't know any other class that can have that kind of a track record, but I've been very, very, very lucky. Some great students. You may have even interviewed a few of them. I don't know. Do you know Megan Beaumont or Bob Rothstein? I won't go naming a bunch of people, but I've had a lot of success with writers getting published.
No, I haven't heard. I'm not familiar with them. I'm gonna go check them out because I was looking for new stuff to read. So, and so so the MFAs. Yeah, I've always been curious about those too because they're they could be very expensive courses versus learning like privately through you, I would think, versus going through like a whole program like that. But I don't know. Some people seem to love it. So,
yeah. Well, to be a member of my class is $400 for a 10-week session. And you don't write a book in 10 weeks. Most don't. But I have another thing. We allow auditors to come in and sit and watch everything we're doing. And it's extremely valuable. And that's only $50. So I've had people that have their MFAs audit my class and afterwards say, Les, I learned more just watching you and your students in 10 weeks than I learned the whole of my college experience. Because we're very practical. We're not teaching a bunch of pie in the sky stuff. Our only aim is to get everybody takes our class, get them published, and that's what we strive for. We do real things, and I'm very, very proud of it. Very proud of my students. They're a hardworking bunch, and they're very talented.
What is like your writing process then? Like you mentioned outlining. Do you like sit or do you just sit down and start writing a book, or do you have it all mapped out? What is your writing process?
Actually, I have to have a book. If I'm writing a novel, it has to percolate in my brain pan for about 10 years, 8 to 10 years. But I've always got 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 novel ideas going on at once constantly. So when it's not like I finish one and I've got to wait another 8 to 10 years, I've got another one just waiting in line. I'll never run out of things to write about. But they had to percolate. I do insist my students outline, but it's not an outline like Roman numeral and page after page like Mrs. Grundy did back in PS 109. Our outline consists of 15 to 25 words, and it's 5 statements. It's one statement. It begins it and lists the inciting incident, whatever created the problem the novel is going to concern itself with. The next 3 are the 3 major turns in a novel, and the 5th statement is the resolution. And the only definition of a resolution with us is that it has to contain a win and a loss. It's a very simple outline, but I do kind of insist on an outline, especially with newer people, because I wouldn't jump in a car and start driving to Alaska unless I had a map. And I think the people that say they're pantsers and they don't want the freedom of just writing what comes in their mind and all that crap, I think they're kind of fibbing to themselves. It's like Hemingway said, no, I never outlined, but he did. He wrote drafts. He called his outlines drafts, and they were 100,000 words each. So he'd write draft 1, draft 7, draft 8. They were all outlines. They were just the wrong way to outline. I think too time consuming.
And what are the tools of the trades that you use then? Is it just like a Word document or like a notepad, note cards, or?
No, our online class is just on a thing called Slack. It's We don't have meetings in person. Every week, each student posts a certain number of pages to the class. The entire class and myself reads them, and I limit my class to 10 people. And because it used to be they had to read everybody's work and comment on everybody's, got to be too much for them. So there's 5 in one section and 5 in another, although they can read anybody they want to and comment on it. But they read the others in their section and then post back comments for the entire class. And I do the same. So it's like being in a real class on the ground. Everybody sees what everybody else is doing. We comment on each other, and we're not a hold your hand, pat you on the back class. Everybody in my class could relate instances where I told them to go bury that crap in your backyard as deep as you can so you never come across it again. Or I'm throwing up my mouth when I read stuff. We're not kind, but we're realistic. We not only tell you what's wrong, we tell you how to fix it.
Well, that right there is good training too, if you want to be a writer, because you need thick skin.
Yeah. No, thick skins don't work in our class. I haven't lost many, but I've lost a few. There's always a few snowflakes.
Yeah. And so I was curious too now with this whole pandemic thing. Has that changed your writing process at all, or
no?
No, that's the same.
No, I've been a writer all my life, and I've been full-time writer for many years. My daily job is sitting in front of the computer writing. And it's the same with or without, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like as writers, we've already been self-isolating for years.
Sure, absolutely.
What scenes do you find? Do you find any scenes that are harder to write than others, or?
Yeah, and a lot of time, sex scenes are hard for me because it's hard to be original. Mm. But I wrote what I felt was the most original sex scene ever written. At least it was by me. And what I did was, most people, when they try to write sex scenes, they try to one up everybody. They have the character screaming louder, more fingernails on the back and stuff like that. And I said, everybody does this, and it doesn't work. And so what I did, the best sex scene I ever wrote was, I had a couple. They were new to each other. They just met each other, this detective and a girl, and they're in the top floor of a duplex in New Orleans. And the bad guys are on the bottom apartment, and they're in the top. They can't even walk across the floor in their stocking feet without alerting the bad guys to them. So when they make love the first time, it's under those situations. And so rather than be loud, they had to be extremely quiet and still when they were making love for the first time. And it turned out to be an excruciating scene and excruciatingly sexual. So I'm very, very proud of that. And then when I sold that book at auction in Random House, and the guy said I needed to cut it, so I did. I never put it back in when it got published later.
That's the thing with the publishing, are they? They cut.
Yeah. Yeah, it's when I got screwed by Random House, and I'm proud to say it.
Yeah, that's one of the drawbacks of the publishing side of the business, right?
Oh, there's a lot of drawbacks, Alan. Trust me, you know that.
Authors influenced you when you were coming up.
I like people like Carrie Crews. My favorite writer, and I think the guy I think is the best writer ever was Camus. My friends all kind of know that, and so I've got like 20 copies of The Stranger around because that's my favorite book. So every Christmas I get a copy of The Stranger, and if you need a copy, I can give you one. But I like I've always liked dark fiction. I like when I was real little, I read the Russians and then the French writers. And my grandmother had a library. It was it was better than the public library. And that's where I started reading. Maupassant was one of the first, Duffy Maupassant was one of the first writers I read. I read the Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire when I was 6, stuff like that. Death on the Installment Plan. I didn't read the Hardy Boys books at all. I started right out with adult books, and that's what I enjoy.
You said that Hard Times started as a short story. Did you find that challenging then to flesh that into a whole novel, or did it come to?
No, you just have to understand the difference between a short story and a novel. Mm-hmm. And a novel isn't just a longer short story. Basically, a novel is like a movie, and a short story is like a TV series. And in a novel, you still have that rising action and the epiphany and all that stuff. You no longer have those in short stories. Editors assume today that all the truths in life have been discovered. So you just have a little blip of a small insight in short stories. And that's what my short stories are. But a novel has to be more than that. So that's where it gave me a lot of room to expand and everything. The other short story besides A Mother's Love, or I changed the title to Hard Times, was about a black guy in Detroit that escaped prison in Michigan. He killed a guy robbing a bank, trying to get money for his daughter who's in an iron lung and couldn't afford it. And so he got caught, got thrown in prison. He escaped from prison and traveled to New Orleans, which is where we pick him up in the story. And he ended up killing a white cop in New Orleans and wanted to lam again. Ended up where Amelia, the woman protagonist in her family, she saved him from her dogs killing him, and then they take off together. So I was able to put it together and get an overriding arc and an epiphany and all that stuff, which you don't have to have in a short story.
Writing short stories people might think, oh, they're easier, but it's hard to write a short story.
They are works. For some people, but I believe kind of like what not Camus, Chekhov said. An interviewer asked him how he got his ideas for short stories, and he was talking to him, and he looked over and there was a coffee or a teacup there, and he said, "See that teacup?" And the interviewer said, "Yeah." And he said, "Tonight I'll write a short story about that." That's short stories to me are very, very easy. There's just no money in them.
Yeah, that's the problem. And like, how many words does usually consist for a short story?
Oh, it really depends. Now they've even further divided the limits into flash fiction, sudden fiction, all that stuff. But a normal short story, I would say, is about 9,000 to 12,000 words.
Yeah, okay.
That's what used to be considered a short story. Now they get them a lot shorter. And when I started writing, there wasn't the internet or anything. So when you publish a collection today, they throw them out like crazy, and there's not much to them. But when I was writing, everything was done paper and ink or paper and typewriter. And to get a collection, publishers did not want to publish them because there's no money and never has been in collections. So to make sure there was an audience to get a collection published of your work, you had to have at least half the stories published in reputable literary journals, which I did. And then they thought, well, at least there's a small audience there. Then they would publish them knowing they still wouldn't make any money. Today with the internet, you can throw all kinds of crap, and they do. There is a lot of crap out there posting short story collections and anthologies and everything. I've taken part in them, but I don't take a lot of pride in most of them. There's no such thing as editors anymore, for one thing, and except copy editors, and that's not an editor. But I'm sorry, I'm the old guy, yelling at the clouds and telling the kids to get off my lawn.
Yeah, well, no, it really has. I mean, I can imagine because you've seen the changes. But yeah, I read the old articles about I can't remember the name of the real famous editors of back in the old days, and you don't see it. I don't think you have that anymore.
No, it's gone.
Yeah.
When I had a book accepted in auction by Random House. It got down to Random House in St. Martin's, and it was called The Perfect Crime at the time. And I went with Random House. I should have went with St. Martin's. Random House offered me $45,000, and St. Martin's offered $50,000 for the advance. And now I know you take the money, but I went with Random House because they were Random House. And 2 weeks later, Bertelsmann bought them, and they shit-canned a bunch of books, and mine was one of them. I got first payment of $12,500, and that was it.
Oh, wow.
And and I closed my business and everything because I thought now's the time to write full time. 2 weeks later, I'm out of a business. It's hurt me financially up till this minute. But that's the one I was telling you about. I had this sex scene, and it was my favorite of all time. But I forgot where I was going with this. I have Alzheimer's, so you just got to yank me back if I get off track too much. I had rewritten this novel probably 8 times, completely rewritten it. My agent got it, loved it, and had me rewrite it 4 more times. And then I got my editor at Random House, and he made me rewrite. I'm talking about total rewrites 4 more times. That's the way it used to be. And they weren't like copy editing, put a comma here, do the change a word here. They were edits. where take this character out, put this character in on major stuff. That's no longer done much anymore, except maybe the big five. They might be the only ones doing that anymore. But
I can imagine, like, so basically it would take from the time you start writing to the book being published, it would take well over a year probably then to.
Yeah, that was normal. A year is kind of a short time in those days.
Yeah.
And that was done on typewriter. That wasn't done, with electrons where you can change things real quickly and everything. In fact, when you change something, you had to start at the beginning and type the whole thing out again.
Oh my gosh.
A lot of work and a lot of money. When my first novel got published, I didn't get an agent. I just went to publishers and I went alphabetically. And the 96th person I sent it to, I was going to do 100. 96th person I sent it to took it. I had 4 more to go, and it was University of North Texas Press, and I went alphabetically. So I was in the universities. There weren't many publishers left for me to send it to. But that's when you had to send the entire manuscript in and give return snail mail postage for them to slap it back to you. So it was not only expensive, it was just, it was very expensive. It cost 20 some bucks to send and receive a manuscript to one person. Today, you hit a button on the on the computer and that's it.
Yeah. At least that part's a little better for the writer.
I see people say, "Well, I sent my thing to 20, 30 people. We get a button, dude. You haven't done any work. You don't have a clue what work is."
And so, what are you working on now? What's next for you?
Well, I've got a couple of things. I've got a children's story. I'm talking to a friend of mine about co-writing with her about a squirrel that's afraid of heights. And I've got 2 more noir novels, crime novels I'm writing on. So I usually have about 5 to 10 projects going at once. I just sent Danny a proposal for a new writer's craft book where I use the movie Thelma and Louise is the basis for it, which I use a lot in my teaching. It's the most perfect written movie ever, in my opinion. It's perfect written novel. In fact, there's not a single scene in it that should be taken out or that isn't a teaching moment. Not a single one. It's absolutely flawless. But anyway, and some other things I forget. Half the time I forget what I'm doing. But yeah, I've got 2 novels I'm working on now. One's about a guy that he's kind of a hitman that makes his hits look like accidents. So he works with very wealthy people to take out their wife or husband, but he makes them all look like accidents. And it's turning into an encyclopedia for the perfect crime. I have a bunch of perfect crimes in there. And there are perfect crimes and there are criminals that get away with it. Trust me on that. In fact, I think it's something like only 30% of all murders get solved. So there's about 70% people walk around got away with it as far as murders. So it's not, crime doesn't pay. In fact, when I got caught, they caught me for, I think it was 82 crimes, 82 burglaries, and I had over 400. And they didn't get me on any of them. I had a rap partner rolled over on me.
Oh, wow.
That's the only reason they knew about that. And after I started working by myself, I never had any problems. In fact, when I got out of prison, I didn't quit doing criminal activities. I just quit getting caught for a long time.
Yeah, that is shocking. I remember reading about that because I was reading about the cold cases, and I was shocked to see how many, like you said, 70% of even murders are never solved.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I had a cop tell me the perfect. He said, "You're going to ever want to murder somebody, I tell you the perfect way." And he says, "Put them in a car, break their neck, but break it the right way, and then send them down a ravine into a tree. They always get away with it." He said, "That's simple."
Yeah, and that's for writing fodder, not for anything else.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I would never think of doing anything like that.
So Les, before I let you go here, I always like to ask my guests, and you're going to be perfect for this because of your background teaching. Any advice for aspiring writers listening to this podcast?
The best advice I can give, I'm going to steal from another writer. Now I can't think of his name, but anyway, he said, read, if you want to become a good writer, read the whole of Western literature for the past 400 years. And then if you live long enough, read the same amount of time in Eastern literature, because if you don't know what passed for good in the past, you don't know what passes for good today. And that's my advice. That's where you really learn to write, is read, and read everything you can get your hands on.
That's good advice. And so where can the listeners find you? You have online, do you have a website?
Yeah, I have a blog that I don't tend to as much as I could. It's www.lessedgertononwriting.blogspot.com / and I'm on Amazon. I have an author's page there. You just go to Les Edgerton, all my books will pop up there. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Les, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really had a good time talking with you.
Thank you, Alan. I just bought your book, by the way, Odd Jobs.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the read.
Oh, no. Now I'm getting a little, now I'm on the spot here.
No, you're not. Your name's on it, man. Be proud of it.
Yeah. Thanks, Les. Thanks for listening to the Meet the Thriller Author podcast. Be sure to visit thrillerauthors.com to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover great thrilling reads. If you enjoy the podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review to it, wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast, be it iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, wherever it is that you're listening to this right now. I would appreciate it. And please do check out my own thriller novels over at my website at alanpeterson.com. Until next time.